Hello there. So much for living in a free country. So we're now learning more about the secretive units that were used during the health emergency to shut down dissent. But if you believe this is a new phenomenon, then you should think again. And if you think it will all be shut down now the health emergency is over, think again. Because there is to be only one truth, the official narrative, and all who promote it will be rewarded, and those who question it will be cancelled and punished, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. In fact, that leads to a doubling down, all for the greater good, of course. But the efforts to control the narrative came under the spotlight after the Counter-Disinformation Unit was stood to on the 5th of March 2020 for the pandemic. And it was also stood to for the 2019 EU MEP elections and the 2019 general election. And straight away the government was there telling us how safe it was making us by cracking down on health misinformation and disinformation and online phishing scams. With the Culture Secretary at the time, Oliver Dowden, saying, "We need people to follow expert medical advice and stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives. It is vital that this message hits home and that misinformation and disinformation which undermines it is knocked down quickly. We're working with social media companies and I'll be pressing them this week for further action to stem the spread of falsehoods and rumours which could cost lives." What that meant was that any highly qualified people who would normally have been trusted, who disagreed with this, were to be squashed, cancelled, and have their livelihood stripped from them. This unit sounds more like a government narrative enforcement outfit. And well before the pandemic, in mid-2018, the government's communication service set up a rapid response unit designed to monitor news and information being shared and engaged with online to identify emerging issues with speed, accuracy and with integrity. The Rapid Response Unit was based across the Cabinet Office and Number 10, but when it was set up the official screed said, "The RRU is neither a rebuttal unit nor is it a fake news unit." But now we're told that this RRU was used during the pandemic to actively search for what it considered to be fake news. Wonder how many qualified virologists it had. And then pass the reports to the Counter-Disinformation Unit, the CDU. And it's also claimed that the RRU sent requests to social media providers to have posts removed. And further, that government units had a trusted flagger status within the offices of these big social media giants. There was even a counter-disinformation policy forum where the government, officials, social media and the BBC got together to work out how they could limit the spread of what they considered to be disinformation. And you think this is limited to the health emergency? You don't think they're doing this sort of thing with something like net zero, maybe? Of course they're not. They wouldn't dream of doing that, would they? And with social media wanting to remain as free as possible of government interference, it has a huge incentive to help a government control the narrative, as well as provide space for those handsomely paid for government advertisements to tell us all how well they're doing. Very symbiotic. And there is also the use of an AI company to analyse online disinformation and misinformation, a company called Logically that the Telegraph says has some sort of relationship with Facebook that appears to allow Logically's fact-checkers to have huge influence over what content people see. And according to the report, they even targeted posts that were legitimate and correct to prevent them being weaponised against the government narrative. And expert advice seems to be anything that the government said. Now, to some, those who believe totally in the government and the corporates to tell them the truth, they will be perfectly fine with this, as long as it fits their own personal narrative, that is. But now we enter the realms of real doublethink. Tory voters generally distrust a Labour government and anything it says, and Labour voters distrust a Tory government in just the same way. Ask one side if the other lies about everything, and the answer will generally be a yes. But where the health emergency was concerned, on that one narrow topic, all sides got together and trusted the Tory government, at least in public. They suddenly trusted the untrustworthy Boris. But it didn't stop the opposition trying at every turn to prove Boris Johnson and the Tories, in general, were pure liars and not to be trusted. How could so many people trust the government on this one thing, but believe they lied about everything else? But everyone was expected to trust the untrustworthy 100% on the pandemic responses. And the opposition doesn't seem concerned about these secretive monitoring units either, presumably because they quite look forward to employing their services when they get the reins next year. Now there's a chilling thought. But maybe the public has finally cottoned on. I wonder how many people in future, apart from the ones that profited handsomely, I wonder how many of the rest of us will look suspiciously at any future far-reaching diktats of the sort we saw in 2020 and 2021. The people that will feel most comfortable with that level of control are the same ones that are welcoming their future 15-minute neighbourhood, car-less, travel-restricted world. For them, control is wonderful because they need it, like a child needs a comfort blanket. And given the amount of money and power being deployed into net zero, it would be almost a stunning surprise if our government wasn't deploying such measures to shut down dissenting voices. How else are they getting people to agree to bankrupting themselves and the nation into giving up cheap energy to replace it with something that is intermittent and much more expensive? These people will also probably feel very comfortable with the country's future health emergency response being handed over to the WHO. Just because the Tory government is comfortable with it, and because the Labour opposition is comfortable with it. But opposition to this new treaty is growing amongst the population. So I wonder how long it will be until the anti-government narrative units are stood to coordinate with social media and the BBC on that one. Well, we've already got BBC Verify ready to ensure that there's only one state broadcaster narrative, haven't we? All these people ready to do the bidding of the rich and powerful by pulling a social media lever here, a BBC string there, while whispering in the ears of compliant ministers. Still think you live in a free country? All very depressing, I know. But we, as a collective, do vote for the people that do this to us.